Welcome to Industry TV Network. Make sure you hit the like button, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Just in case I go live or drop a video, you will be notified. In this video, we'll be discussing the life and times of Alfa Anderson, a member of one of my favorite groups of all time, Chic, the greatest acoustic, bass line, instrumentals, vocals I've ever heard, and drove me crazy from I was 5 years old. That's when I first started listening to the group Chic. Alfa Anderson was born in Augusta, Georgia on September 7th, 1946. Her parents named her Alfa from Alpha, the first letter of the Greek alphabet, with the PH changed to an F, in honor of her father's name, Alfonso, because she was their firstborn child. Musically inclined from a young age, Anderson composed her first song at age 3. Although Anderson showed early talent for music, she pursued a traditional education path. She attended Payne College, followed by Teachers College, Columbia University, where she earned a master's degree in English. She sang in the college choirs of both Payne and Columbia. In 1976, Anderson made her professional debut in Cannonball Adderley's Big Man, The Legend of John Henry, sponsored by the Newport Jazz Festival at Carnegie Hall. Her second professional appearance was at Lincoln Center, where she performed in Children of the Fire in 1974, written by Hannibal Marvin Peterson. Anderson worked as a lecturer at Hunter College in New York City while singing on weekends with Kenny and Everett Bronner, founders of the band Raw Sugar. This led to work with other bands such as Lou Courtney and Buffalo Smoke, where she met Edna Holt, and later Fonzie Thornton and Michelle Cobbs. Holt introduced Anderson to Luther Vandross, who at the time sang backup for various groups. Anderson recorded background vocals for Nat Adderley, Roy Buchanan, Dionne Warwick, Odyssey, and many others. Her voice appears on the soundtrack to The Wiz, produced by Quincy Jones in 1978, and Atlantic Records Live at Montreux, produced by Arif Mardin and Herbie Mann, also in 1978. In 1977, Vandross encouraged Anderson to audition as a background vocalist for Chic, a new band created by Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards. Anderson's and Vandross's background vocals appear on the eponymous debut album Chic, which contained the #1 hits Dance, 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 and the Billboard charted Everybody Dance. Anderson became a lead singer when one of Chic's original leads, Norma Jean Wright, left the group in 1978, along with fellow lead Lucy Martin. Chic would go on to produce many more charted hits, including the multi-platinum Le Freak 1978 and Good Times 1979, as well as My Forbidden Lover, also in 1979. Anderson is the lead vocalist for the top 10 hit I Want Your Love in 1978 and At Last I'm Free in 1978. At the height of Chic's fame, Anderson regularly appeared on television shows such as Soul Train, The Midnight Special, and Top of the Pops. She also worked on the Chic-produced sessions of Sister Sledge's We Are Family in 1979, Diana Ross's Diana in 1980, and Johnny Mathis's I Love My Lady 1981. In 1983, Rodgers and Edwards dissolved the original Chic band. During this time, Anderson began touring internationally with Luther Vandross, and from 1982 until 1987, she performed with him at venues such as Wembley Stadium in London. Anderson continued to work with other notable artists, appearing on albums by Bryan Adams, Gregory Hines, Mick Jagger, Teddy Pendergrass, Jennifer Holliday, Billy Squier, Sheena Easton, Jody Watley, Brian Ferry, and Jonathan Butler. Anderson earned a second master's degree in educational leadership from Bank Street College in New York, New York. In the 1990s, she became a principal at El Puente Academy for Peace and Justice High School in Brooklyn, New York. Anderson continued to record and perform. She released the single Former First Lady of Chic in 2013 and the album Music from My Heart in 2017. Anderson toured internationally with a trio she formed with former Chic members Norma Jean Wright and Lucy Martin. In 2016, the group sang with Arista Freaks and guest vocalist Kathy Sledge on the song Get On Up, which reached number 2 on Billboard's club chart. Nile Rodgers recreated Chic with new vocalists in 1992. Anderson and Lucy Martin appear on the Chic track I'll Be There, 2015. The song reached number 1 on Billboard's Hot Dance Club Songs chart. Alfa Anderson was married to producer, composer, and bass player L. Uriel Tinker Barfield, whom she met while touring with Vandross. In addition to Vandross, Barfield has recorded or performed with Lou Rawls, the B-52s, Jaheim, Roberta Flack, The Roches, Marvin Cease, Doc Powell, Martha Walsh, Debbie Gibson, Jennifer Holliday, Ashford and Simpson, and many other celebrated artists. Anderson and Barfield formed a group named Voices of Shalom, dedicated to exploring spiritual themes through original compositions. They released 2 albums, Messages in 1999 and Daily Bread in 2005. A single released in 2005 called What a Spirit features Lisa Fisher and Keith Anthony Fluitt. In 1979, 2 defining forces in dance music united on a lavish 2-record compilation. Casablanca Records, disco's most successful record company, provided a passport to Studio 54, the trendiest discotheque in the world. For those who never ventured beyond the velvet rope, a night at Studio 54 was the next best thing. Legendary DJ Roy Thod and Casablanca's Special Projects VP Mark Paul Simon sequenced a continuous mix of club favorites across 4 sides. Rather than open the set with one of Casablanca's artists, who were certainly well represented elsewhere, Thod selected one of Studio 54's anthems, Le Freak by Chic. Penned and produced by group founders Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards, Le Freak was originally introduced on Chic's second album, CS Chic, in 1978. Few listeners could resist the group's invitation to come on down to 54, especially with Rodgers, Edwards, and drummer Tony Thomas bolstering an infectiously funky rhythm section. The song had catapulted Chic to number 1 on the disco, pop, and R&B singles charts, and became the biggest selling single in the history of Atlantic Records. When the group's fans dropped the needle on side 2 of Siesta Chic, they discovered even more Chic brilliance on I Want Your Love and At Last I Am Free. The former became a top 10 hit, while the latter epitomized the luster of Chic's ballads. Both became touchstones in the Chic catalog and both also happened to feature Alfa Anderson on lead vocals. At the time, many listeners knew Anderson from the Chic album cover. She was the sophisticated lady leaning against the couch, her beautiful visage lost in a midday reverie. The pose corresponded to the quality of her voice, cool and elegant with sensual undertones. From 1978 to 1983, Anderson and Lucy Martin fronted Chic as the group scored a second groundbreaking #1 single with Good Times and climbed the UK charts with My Forbidden Lover and My Feet Keep Dancing. However, Anderson had already tilled a fertile musical foundation. Here is what she had to say in an interview she did in 2013. When did singing become more of a focus for you? When I went to Payne College, I started singing in the choir. That experience reignited my passion for singing. I also joined the choir at Columbia University's Teachers College when I moved to New York to pursue a master's degree. Interviewer: give me the sights and the sounds of living in New York on your own during the early 70s. Alfa: New York was exciting. Every day brought a new adventure. I lived in Harlem on West 152nd Street. At that time, Harlem wasn't gentrified. It was steeped in African and African American culture. There was a thirst to find out all you could about your heritage. One of my college friends introduced me to the National Black Theater and all the sights and sounds of 125th Street. The bookstore where you could read, engage in discussions, listen to poetry, or dance to the rhythms of African drums. The street vendors selling incense, baubles, African art, beautiful African prints. Street corner philosophers and pedagogues were everywhere. The Black Panthers talking about unity. The Israelites exhorting us to return to the one true and living God. The Garveyites, who urged us to embrace and return to Africa. The Muslims with their greetings of Assalamu alaikum, copies of Muhammad Speaks, and bean pies. Even the winos held court on the differences between the philosophies of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. We wore our afros and Afrocentric garb proudly. Of course, when my mother found out that I was wearing an afro, she freaked out. A friend from Augusta was studying journalism at Columbia University at the same time I was earning my master's in teaching English at Teachers College. I remember the fateful day that her mother saw me on campus wearing my afro. She just had to tell my mother, who called to let me know how embarrassed she was that I would do something like wear an afro. She threatened to commit suicide by jumping out the first floor window of our house. Interviewer: wow. Well, I guess that strengthened your mother-daughter bond. After you graduated from Teachers College, you became a teacher at Hunter College. When did you lock into a community of musicians? Two of my homeboys from Augusta, Kenny and Everett Browner, had moved to New York, formed a group, and were playing at local clubs. I auditioned and became part of that group. At some point, I joined another group, Lou Courtney and Buffalo Smoke. Edna Holt, who went on to join the Ritchie family, was the other background singer. One day, Edna and I were at a studio rehearsing, and she said, "When we're on break, there are some friends that I'd like you to meet. There's Fonzie, Michelle, and this incredible singer named Luther that you've just got to meet." Later that day, I was introduced to Fonzie Thornton and Michelle Cobbs. Then there was this guy sitting in overalls, head down, Luther Vandross. They took me over to introduce me to Luther. He looked up and said hi and put his head back down very quickly. I said, "Oh, that went well. I guess this guy doesn't like me." I decided to stick around so I could hear this guy that Edna was bragging about. From the very first note, I was smitten. Shortly thereafter, I was surprised when someone called me to ask if Luther could have my phone number. It wasn't too long after that Luther and I got together. We started talking and we became great friends. I would go to his house all the time. We would sing together. Robin Clark would also come over. Crystal Davis and others would come. We would cook, eat, and sing. It was during those conversations and rehearsals that I learned about a whole new world of music. Interviewer: were you still teaching at Hunter College at this time? Alfa: yes. True to my Southern upbringing, I wasn't about to give up a steady paycheck to chase this dream called show business. I didn't resign from Hunter until Chic's first tour. Interviewer: from what I understand, one of your first major performances was a show that Cannonball Adderley scored. Yes, Big Man, which was my first and only performance at Carnegie Hall. That's also when I got my first New York Times review. My mother flew up to see her show business daughter play Maggie, a hooker whose featured solo was a song called Grind Your Own Coffee. My second professional debut was at Lincoln Center, where I performed a solo piece called Children of the Fire, written by a trumpet player named Hannibal Marvin Peterson. It was actually his way of protesting what was happening in Vietnam, so in my own way I became an activist for peace and justice. One of the lines from the song really impacted me. Oh God, take these eyes so I can't see how my mother cries. That line filled me with compassion for children of war, and there are all sorts of wars. I used to cry on the inside when I would see how some children would go to sleep at night with a lullaby, and other kids would go to sleep to bombs or sirens, or gunshots or abuse, parents fighting. Interviewer: joining Chic marked quite a transition from what you'd been doing. Your initial role in the group was as a background vocalist. Of course, background vocals were a huge part of that first Chic 1977 album. I know Luther Vandross contacted you for the session. What do you recall about that? Alfa: David Lasley, Luther and I arrived before the other singers, Robin Clark and Diva Gray. Luther ordered a chicken. I started marking papers, and David sat by himself with his head down. I was later told that Bernard pulled Niall to the side and asked, "Are you sure these are the singers you want?" Niall said, "Trust me, it's going to be fine." Interviewer: Chic hit big with Dance, Dance, Dance and Everybody Dance. And then Norma Jean went solo with Norma Jean in 1978. How did you get promoted to a lead vocalist? When Norma Jean went on to do her solo album, Niall and Bernard approached Luther about asking me to stay on and join Lucy as a lead singer. I was excited and nervous at the same time because I knew I had some big shoes to fill. Interviewer: of course, so many people loved your performance on I Want Your Love off CS Chic. What's your favorite memory of hearing it? Alfa: I absolutely loved it. I loved the arrangement. I loved the lyrics. It made me feel like I was really an integral part of the group, not just a background singer. It actually forced me to throw off my Southern Baptist roots and not be so shy about expressing my sensuality or sexuality. That was a growth experience. I still love that song. What does At Last I Am Free mean to you? At Last I Am Free is a beautiful ballad off CS Chic that really spotlights the clarity of your voice. What does the song mean to you? When I first heard At Last I'm Free, the haunting melody and the lyrics just tugged at my heartstrings. At the time, I was in a relationship with someone who could not totally commit to me. I knew it wasn't good for me, but I kept being drawn back to the relationship. Finally, I decided that even though it was going to be difficult and painful, I had to break it off. Over the years, this song has come to be a metaphor for life's journey. We all need to find the courage to open our eyes and look at what is going on with us, and to admit when something is no longer serving your highest good, and then have the courage to let it go and move forward with anticipation of things getting better. It's hard, but it's essential for growth. Whether it's a relationship or a job that doesn't fulfill you, you need to move on. I Want Your Love and At Last I Am Free were good for me because they allowed me to share my vulnerable side. I'm lonely, please listen. I could never say that in real life. I could never be that honest. I was always hiding those feelings, but in At Last I Am Free, I could be honest. Interviewer, La Freak also brought out another part of your personality. Alfa, it did. Diva Gray and I sang that lead together. La Freak really taught me to let go of the rules and have fun, not only in the studio, but on stage. I began to really appreciate the nuances of the Chic vocal style. This singing that's percussive, but also legato, that has these crescendos and decrescendos. It's a specific vocal technique that really works with that whole rhythm section. I understand it even better now. Chic's style was a blending of pop and R&B. Of the current artists and performers, I think Beyonce and Rihanna are really good at that rapid-fire vocal style that merges pop and R&B really well. In Chic, the singers didn't get the songs in advance. You would walk into the studio, listen to the track, read the lyrics, work out the vocals in the control room, and go out into the booth and put it down. To help us get the groove, we would usually start at the end. Usually the hook or the outro gave you plenty of chances to ride the groove. We'd start at the end and then go back to the top. It's during that repetition that you get the rhythm. Once you got that on the end, then you can go back to the top and sing the song. At that point, you have the song's DNA. Interviewer, how would you distinguish being a member of Chic in the studio versus on stage? Alfa, the studio was where you put in all the work, and the stage was where you reaped the rewards. You got a chance to sing to people who really loved it. To be on stage and to hear people singing back and giving you that energy and just applauding you for what you're doing. You get an opportunity to look at people and smile. Interviewer, Chic members were always dressed to the nines. Describe the evolution of the group's fashion sense. Alfa, I think we fine-tuned our style as we went along. From the beginning, Niall and Nard had a concept of a style like Brian Ferry of Roxy Music and Motown, whose acts were very well groomed. It was a blending of those two concepts and styles. When we added a stylist to the group, the wardrobe became even more personalized within the context of the original style. Hats became my signature. Sometimes our choices were great. Other times it got really interesting, like the time we were in Europe and found these hats that had these feathers that went around the rim and then protruded out from our heads. Lucy and I thought we were très chic, but in retrospect, I think we just looked silly. When we were able to shop on Rodeo Drive, I was ecstatic. I still have a letter from Giorgio's in Beverly Hills thanking me for coming in and buying clothes. I also have a card signed by Holston that was sent backstage along with some flowers. That was after Niall and Bernard wrote "He's the Greatest Dancer" for Sister Sledge and mentioned Holston, Gucci, Via Lucci. Interviewer, the Chic album covers were always so different from one another. I've always wondered about the concept behind Risque, 1979. Alfa, Niall and Bernard really conceived that. They had it all worked out. What I did know was that they wanted a whodunit kind of thing. I'm the lady of the house. Tony and Lucy are the help. Niall is the detective, and Bernard is the husband that's been KILLED. It was a very classy looking cover. On the inside sleeve, there's a clue about who did it. Interviewer. By this point, Michelle Cobb and Fonzie Thornton came in as the background mainstays. Alfa. They came in and carried the mantle forward. You can hear Fonzie and Michelle all up in the mix on these songs. Good Times, My Forbidden Lover. We had a great sound. Interviewer. We've spoken about the Diana Ross sessions, Diana 1980 before, but did you also sing on the Johnny Mathis session, I Love My Lady, 1981 too? Alfa. Yes, it was another highlight for me. I thought the project was great for him, but the record company didn't like it. It wasn't Johnny Mathis. He was such an iconic singer with a particular style. It was probably deemed too much of a gamble to risk releasing something so different. Interviewer. Yes, I think that is what's so impressive about Niall and Bernard's productions at that point. They went from producing Sister Sledge to Diana Ross to Johnny Mathis to Deborah Harry to Carly Simon, Alfa. They just kept growing as writers and producers. There were some songs that we wanted to keep for ourselves. For a brief moment, we thought, oh no, they're giving away some really great songs that would be good for Chic. Au contraire, they weren't giving away the best songs. They were being sensitive to each artist they produced. Interviewer. Believer 1983 was the last Chic album that you appeared on before Niall and Bernard dissolved the group. Note, Rodgers and Edwards relaunched Chic in 1992, but with different vocalists. At what point did you reunite with Luther and began singing background with him? Alfa. I joined Luther for his 1982 tour and stayed through 1987. As Chic's popularity as a group was declining, Luther's star was rising. Interviewer. How had Luther's talent grown since you first met him? Alfa. He'd always had an incredible voice, but I remember in the early days he used to perform a lot of vocal gymnastics and riffs. People were not responding to it as much, so he decided that less is more. He began to let the natural beauty of his voice come through and develop his signature sound that only he had. What he found was absolute perfection. You can find that when you love your voice and you understand your gift, he fine-tuned his craft. Interviewer. While backing Luther, did you ever think about being a solo artist? Alfa. I thought about it, but I wasn't ready. The prospect of being on my own was pretty daunting to me. I loved being in a group and having that experience. Interviewer. Who were your co-background singers when you started singing with Luther? Alfa. When I started singing with him, it was Tawatha Aggie from M2Me, Brenda White King, and Phil Ballou. Later on, Tawatha and Brenda left, and we added Lisa Fisher, Ava Cherry, Kevin Owens, and Paulette McWilliams. All of them were wonderful singers who still have successful careers in the music industry today. Interviewer. What do you think of all of Luther's background vocalists shared in common? What do you think all of Luther's background vocalists shared in common? I don't think there was a person on that stage who did not genuinely love Luther and respect his talent. He created vocal alchemy. He understood how to layer the vocals in a way that I've never seen anyone else do. He would always talk about the weight and the character of a voice, whether it was dark, husky, clear, or piercing. For instance, Lisa Fisher and I were both sopranos, but she sang top soprano on So Amazing, and I sang second on Jump to It or Till My Baby Comes Home. I would sing first soprano and Lisa would sing second. I loved Luther's professionalism and his sense of theater. He would always say to the audience, "I'm not going to mess with your ticket money. You're going to get everything that you paid for." He would do that. My sense of professionalism was very much honed with Luther. Interviewer: so if Luther was about staging and professionalism, then Chic was Alfa, about spontaneity and fun. A lot of the staging that we developed was organic. I remember the night when Lucy and I decided that we would be on either side of Niall and Bernard and dance around them. That became a mainstay in our stage show. Another spontaneous staging sequence happened when we all, as a group, just decided to walk from one side of the stage to the next. The audience went wild. Interviewer: you stayed with Luther through 1987. What prompted you to step away from singing with him? Alfa: I met Tinker Barfield while working with Luther. He was Luther's bass player on the road. We fell in love, got married, and then my priorities changed. When Tinker and I got married, his children gained a bonus mother, and I gained 2 bonus sons. I now had a husband and children to think about. It was a real adjustment because we became a blended family. To make this family work, we had to devote time and energy. We had children who needed to be nurtured and who needed to be assured that they were loved and welcomed into this new family. Family life then made me want to go back into education and make a difference in children's lives. I enrolled in Bank Street College of Education and earned a second master's degree in educational leadership, which ultimately catapulted me from the classroom to the principalship. Interviewer: during your years as a high school principal, did your music past ever come up in conversation? Alfa: it did, and I did everything I could to squelch it because I didn't acknowledge the importance of my contributions to music. Nor did I understand that all of my experiences helped make me who I am today. Now I understand, and I will not deny one moment of my existence on this planet or deny any of the experiences that have made me who I am. I became an educator to empower young people, and in the process, I became empowered. I found that it's through the arts that you can tap into people's passions. It's through the arts that I was able to connect with my students. It's because of this connection that I was able to lead them into the land of classic literature from around the world, and they were able to share their experiences with me. I was struggling to teach them poetic devices when it occurred to me that those same devices were in the music that they were listening to. I brought in rap music, and together we looked for poetic devices. Then I pulled out some of the classic poems. The transfer of knowledge was magical. Interviewer: having made such a difference in people's lives as an educator, what prompted you to start recording again? Alfa: I had a chance to witness up close and personal the transformative power of the arts. I no longer was content to talk about or teach music. I wanted to create it. I took baby steps. Norma, Lucy, and I have been threatening to come together and do something. Tinker was working on a CD, and he said he had a song that he thought would be great for the 3 of us to do, My Lover's Arms. I listened to it. I sent it to them, and they liked it. We decided to record it. It was our first step in getting back together. Tinker included our recording of My Lover's Arms on his album It Is What It Is, 2011. Interviewer: tell me how a former lady of Chic came together. My sons are aspiring songwriters and producers. They came to me one day and said, people really love the classic songs that you sang with Chic, but you haven't done a good job of letting people know that you're still here. You've spent your life, for the time that we've known you, trying to raise the family and be the mom, be the wife, but you've got this whole other life that people love, and yet you're not claiming that. They wrote Former Lady of Chic for me because they thought it was time for me to claim my musical legacy. They, along with my husband, produced it for me. I love it because it tells my story in a very succinct way and reintroduces me to the public. It's my calling card. Interviewer: your video for Former Lady of Chic was recently released. It was filmed around different neighborhoods in New York. Describe the experience of shooting that on location rather than inside of a studio. Alfa: it was an exhilarating experience to be out and all that energy that's generated in Times Square, on the High Line, and along Riverside Park. The other reason I loved it is because when total strangers found out who I was, they would literally and figuratively give me a hug, wish me well, and share their memories of Chic. It made me feel so good, almost like I'd never left music. Interviewer: it's great that the video captures some of those hugs. Based on the response to Former Lady of Chic, is there a full-length solo project in the works? Alfa: yes, I've got some really interesting dance tunes, some covers and some ballads that I'm really excited about and can't wait to present them to the world. The next single, which is going to be a dance tune, will be released in spring 2014. Interviewer: what would you tell Alfa Anderson in 1979? Alfa: I would tell her that she is okay just the way she is, that she is loved. Interviewer: why do you think she would need to hear those particular words? Alfa: she had not yet learned how to embrace and love herself. What I mean by that is not the future self, but the present self. What I've learned is that where you are in your journey is where you need to be. You have two choices: either like where you are or change it. It's for us to learn that lesson, one of many lessons. While we're here in this skin, in this particular body, at this particular time, this is what I've learned. This is what I have known to be true. And thank you for sharing that with us before you left here, Miss Alfa Anderson. Rest in peace, and we will always love you, and we will always listen to you sing those beautiful songs with the great group Chic. Peace and love.